Hey everybody, I'm Ty with Ecotech Solar. We are a locally owned and operated solar design and install firm based here in Bellingham. Founded in 2004. We provide full service solar installs, start to finish. So a few things I was hoping to cover today. I'll start by sharing my screen to give you, let's see. Give you an overview of what I'll be covering. And bear with me here a little bit. It's my first time as a Zoom presenter. So there we go. Perfect. So first, if you got a second, take that survey. Just a few different questions on there, and I'll be using that a little bit later. And then I'll be covering how solar works. So just a broad overview of the policy here in Washington, what you get to do with that electricity other than use it in your house. Covering the latest on the incentives. Those are sort of always in flux. So I want to make sure we're all on the same page about where we are with those currently. Also talk through about what's new. So changes in the technology, efficiency, other related policy pieces that have a big impact on the decision when to go solar and if it's the right fit for your home. And then we'll be talking about the future, what's coming down the pipeline, and how do we be thinking about changes at the local level, national level, and really thinking globally as well, and how solar can help meet those challenges. And then we'll be talking about financing, helping make the cost of systems attainable for everybody. And then lastly, we'll have questions, and I will do what I can to monitor the chat while I'm presenting. But if I haven't gotten anything, I'll circle back around, and hopefully Thomas and Taylor can help kind of circle those questions up once I wrap up and make sure we get all your questions answered. But I'm really excited to be here, and sure appreciate all of you taking some time on this sunny day to talk about solar. Maybe that's a perfect day to be talking about solar. It's a nice sunny
exactly.
day.
I do want to interrupt real quick and to say we didn't have a clickable link in the chat. Rose just dropped another one, so you guys are able to click on that one now, just so you guys know.
Great. Thank you. So maybe I'll give everybody a second to work through that survey while just giving you a high level overview of how solar works. So on a basic level, the most visible part of the system is the solar panels. So those generate DC electricity whenever it's light out. Most of that electricity is generated from direct sunlight, but indirect sunlight on cloudy days or low light conditions on dusk or dawn still gets some electricity. But that electricity goes through one or more inverters that change the electricity into AC electricity, the kind that we use in our home. So that way you're able to use it right then and there. And then sometimes it goes through a solar meter. Not as many of the systems we're installing have one of those anymore. It's just not needed. And then it goes into your house and you get to use it. It's powering your lights, your fridge, whatever is on at that moment. So that way you can, or especially if you're charging your car, you get to know these electrons that are going into my stuff are coming directly from the sun. And then in the times of day when you have extra electricity, when you don't need it. So a day like today, maybe it's just your fridge going, some lights, your computer, obviously. All that extra electricity is going to go back out into the grid. And as it does so, it's going to sort of spin your meter backwards. In reality, it's a digital meter, so you just see a little arrow pointing backwards, but it's keeping track of all the extra electricity you're sending out when you don't need it. So that way at night or cloudy days when we don't generate all of our electricity, you're able to take that back, and PSE is able to track both what comes out, what leaves from your house, and also what you take from the grid. And so on a monthly basis, the way that works is that they'll bill you on the difference between what you've sent them and what you've taken from them over that month. Spring and summer, again, day like today, a lot of extra electricity, tend to produce maybe 2 or 3 times what we use on an average summer day. So that excess during the spring and summer shows up right on your bill as a credit and then rolls forward into the next month. So spring and summer tend to build up that credit bank, almost like a savings account. And then fall and winter, as we start seeing those cloudy days get shorter, we draw that bank down over time. So that really allows us to benefit from the long summer days that we have here, where it tends to correspond with our nice weather, to offset our higher winter usage when it's dark and we all want to be hunkered down inside. So that system is called net metering, and it's specific for Washington State. Each state does things differently, but there's state law that dictates how utilities like Puget Sound Energy, Snohomish PUD, Opalco out in the islands, how they handle that electricity. It's all dictated by state law. There's some slight variations, utility to utility, but generally it's the same. That year that you have to generate electricity and use it up, it doesn't run on the calendar year. Instead, it runs more on sort of our solar resource year. So it starts fresh on April 1st. You have all spring and summer to build it up. If you haven't used those credits by the end of March, they get cleared out. So you don't see any benefit from generating more electricity than you use over a year. There's no financial benefit to that. You've essentially made a donation to the grid. And that's okay for some people. They like to know that they're putting extra onto the grid. But for everybody else, we sure like to get it just right, where you've generated everything you've used without having this big surplus that gets cleared out at the end of March. And I see a typo there. That's March 31st, not March 1st. It's also important to note it's a one-to-one exchange for the excess that you're sending out. It's not that you're selling it to them, and it's not that the utility is buying it. It's more like you are loaning them a certain amount of electricity during the spring and summer, and they're giving you that same amount back during the fall and winter. And that's really important. One of the things I'll touch on later is hedging against future price increases, because the value of your solar electricity you generate is going to track at a one-to-one rate with whatever the utility rate is. So that means at about the 10 cents per kilowatt hour it is now, that's what it's valued at. But in 5 or 10 years, maybe when it's gone up to 15 or 20 cents per kilowatt hour, that's what your solar is worth at that point. So it just keeps increasing in benefit to you. So that's the really basics of how solar is working. So I'm going to take my screen off there and switch over to the poll that we all just filled out. We'll see if I can get that up on the screen. See how it goes. All right, thumbs up from Thomas or Rose if you guys can see that poll. Okay, this just shows everybody participate. I'm going to click through to the next one. Cool. So I thought this might be a little fun thing here. So the question is, where in the world has the most daylight hours annually? So is there one part of the globe that sees more daylight than another? So we've got, I think that's Greenland up there. We've got beautiful Bellingham, Washington, central, maybe Colorado there, Mexico, all good guesses. I'm surprised nobody guessed the Sahara in Africa. Sometimes that's the go-to. It's a trick question. Every single location in the world gets the same amount of daylight hours. And that's really relevant for us here in Bellingham. If you look at the graph of when we get our daylight hours, it tends to be 16 hours or more of daylight during the summer when we have our nice weather. So that's usually where I start when somebody says, come on, Western Washington, it's rainy here all the time. Solar does not work here. There's no way. Just look outside for 6 months out of the year. And it's true, we do see a lot of clouds and we don't see the sky or the sun very much for those months. So it means we don't generate a whole lot of electricity in those months. But to offset that, when we have our long days, it's also our nice weather. And that's really where we generate the majority of our electricity. To kind of illustrate that, May and June alone account for about 25% of our annual solar resource. So just in 2 months, we get a quarter of our solar resource, and that's even before we get to the peak of the summer. So yes, solar works here in Bellingham. It's a great place for solar. So then I wanted to kind of get a sense for where people are in their solar journey. How much knowledge everyone is coming into this this session with. So few people, nope, not doing it, or maybe one person there is like, nope, solar's not for me. But I'm glad you're here anyways to learn. That's a-okay if those little solar garden lights are the most solar you're ever going to do. I think it's great to be here and learn. few people thinking about it, renting, so not in a place to be able to do solar on your home right now. I think that's great too that you're here to learn, and possibly down the road if you are in a spot to be able to go solar. That's great. I mentioned Green Power and Solar Choice here. Those are a few programs that PSE provides to give people an option who can't do solar on their own house, or maybe even who can but can't cover all their usage, to be able to know that the electricity they're using in their homes is coming from green sources or solar. So you pay a bit extra for the electricity you use, knowing that it's being used to invest in those renewable energy sources. And then a little bit of other ones there. So I have solar on my previous home. Great. So somebody has already done solar. That's awesome. If I need to run to the room behind me because my toddler is screaming, sounds like we've got one person in here who can just take over for me on the rest of the presentations to talk about how awesome solar is. So, and then a bunch of people who have just been researching but haven't gone solar. That's great too. Hopefully we'll get some of your questions answered and engage, those areas of your interest. So thanks for filling that out.
I was the one that said that I'd never put solar on. I read it wrong. I totally would. I thought it said I've never, not I've
Got
never.
it. Perfect. Thanks for clarifying that. Great. Then I had another one here. A lot of the homes on the tour this weekend are net zero or close to it. Two homes that we've installed solar on, Felicity House and the Right on Rambler over on Bayside. Both are net zero or significantly better. So I wanted to get a sense for which of those houses you'd like to hear more about, specifically the process we went through with those homeowners and the other people involved in those projects to get to that point. Right on Rambler, solar on an existing remodel or existing home. That's the winner. So when I get to that point, I'll give you a little background on how we came about to getting them to net zero with solar. And then great, we got lots of different things you're hoping to learn. So I'll circle back to these, and these will be some of the questions that we'll make sure to address. So what's different from 6 years ago? Awesome, I'll be touching on that. New technology, do you need a full array or can you do smaller amounts and maybe add to it later? That's great. And then looking for net zero. Awesome, this is all great stuff. Thank you for filling those out. I think that's it for those. So I'm going to bounce back over to the other slides that I had going. Give me 1 second to make sure I've got those. Thanks for bearing with me. Again, I appreciate you filling that poll out. Yeah, we're 1 second. There we go.
We're good. We're all in this together.
All right. So is everybody seeing this presentation again?
No,
I don't think you're quite sharing yet.
Okay, not yet.
There we go.
There we go. Cool. So now that we have a basic understanding of how solar works here in Washington, give you an update on the incentives. As far
You
as
might want to make it full screen size. Sorry to interrupt you.
full screen, no problem, no problem. Let me see. Okay, sorry about that.
You're good.
It seems a little cut off or something at the top, maybe.
Okay,
Or
I'm gonna
it might just be my screen.
take that off for a second. All right.
Let us know if you need help too, because Rose, I think we had the same issue this morning sharing your screen, right? Or it was only half of it. There we go.
How about
We're
now?
good.
That was
Good.
perfect.
Full screen. We're seeing the whole thing. Awesome. Great. So the incentives, they have changed significantly over the last 6 years, specifically at the state level. Some of the incentives haven't shifted a whole lot. But at the state level, we've seen change in what we call the production incentive that was around 6 years ago. That was a program in addition to that net metering that we talked about that has since reached its funding cap. So they're not providing any more state-based production incentives to new systems that are installed. But the flip side of that is that costs have come down really significantly, and I'll touch on that on the next slide. At the federal level, we've seen the tax credit go from 30% of the total system cost. So that's a federal income tax credit that comes off your bottom line taxes owed in the year that you do solar, dollar for dollar offset. So it was 30% previously. It was going to go down to 22% this year, but late last year they extended it for another 2 years at the 26%. So again, that's 26% of the total costs for solar, maintained for this year and next year. So for anybody who is in the spot of considering solar, especially on a new build, or maybe you're planning for a remodel next summer, know that the tax credit at this point is set to stay at 26% all the way through the end of next year. The year after that, 2023, that decreases to 22%. So we see a little bit of a step down. And at this point, it's set to expire, go down to 0% in 2024, making this a really good time to be considering solar and counting on that federal tax credit to help recoup the investment. So at the state level, we saw the closing of that production incentive program, but in its place, we got a sales tax exemption. So you save that sales tax up front. It's just a big old zero on our costs for sales tax, which is really nice. The production incentive, the downside is that you had to wait lots of years to be able to get those checks back. But now you save on the front end, both with the tax credit and with the sales tax exemption and the lower costs. And a couple of the other incentives here are not necessarily dollars and cents incentives, but I think energy independence is a big motivator for a lot of people. Whether that's being able to be independent from the decision of Puget Sound Energy or our other utilities and where they purchase that electricity, and instead knowing that you get to choose to make electricity from your roof and from the sun, rather than buy whatever electricity PSE purchases from coal, natural gas, hydro, with each of those having some downsides to it, as well as getting to kind of take control of how you pay for that as well. Sometimes it's compared to owning the electricity rather than renting it, sort of like you're renting a little tiny bit of PSE's power plant to get electricity for your house, and instead you are owning the equipment to make that electricity and use it in your house. So it's shifting that mindset, similar to renting your home versus buying your home and owning it. And then of course, savings on the electricity bill, keeping that money in your pocket rather than paying it out every month to our utilities. That makes a big difference. And when we talk about the systems, we're talking about 30 plus years of life. They're designed and built to be on your roof and operating for over 3 decades. And that equates to a lot of electricity savings. And a common thing people ask about is, well, I'm not going to be in the house for 30 years. Understandable. I hope that the panels we're installing will outlive even me. But the idea that those panels will continue to be there even after you've moved out of that home is somewhat of a legacy, something that you get to kind of continue offering to whoever it is that's living in that house. So it's an ongoing, I think, benefit to not just you, but future generations. And the last one here is accelerated depreciation. It's only for businesses, but just a quick note to say that if you have a business or if you have a kind of mixed business residential space that you are considering for solar, know that it's an even better deal for you to use that for solar. Happy to talk more in particular about that if you have any questions on it. So what else is new? A big one was an energy code update that went into effect February 1st. And so energy codes are the one of many building codes that dictate how homes are required to integrate energy efficiency technology and reduce their energy usage, or in the case of solar, to generate electricity on site. And so those go through periodic changes. tend to be more stringent as they go. And this latest round upped the number of credits that you're required for to meet those energy codes. So in order to get a building permit, either for remodel or a new home build, you need to meet the energy codes. And so what has shifted is that now you need more of them. And the other big change there was the value of solar electricity in those credits. It's now twice as valuable as it used to be. Or another way to say that is you need half as much solar to get the maximum number of credits. So with solar, you can get up to 3 of your energy code credits from solar. And it doesn't take much solar to get those 3 credits. So it feels like really low-hanging fruit, I think because it is. It doesn't take much roof space, doesn't take much cost, to meet that energy code requirement from what we've heard from builders. It's oftentimes, or in most cases, it's the lowest cost way to meet those 3 additional credits that are needed with the energy code, which is coincidentally what you can get from solar. So that's a big deal as you're considering your next project, whether again, home or remodel. Look into how solar can meet those energy codes, and we're happy to talk more in detail with you about those. But roughly speaking, south-facing roof that gets good sun, you'll need about 10 panels to meet that energy code. And for reference, our average system size, the average system that we're putting in, about 24 panels or so. So the bar to get those energy credits compared to our average system is, again, considerably lower. So I really use that as a starting place. Yes, we can meet those credits, but it's sure a good idea to think about what your energy needs are long-term and think about what sort of added investment it is to get to, net zero or whatever that other goal is when doing solar. Efficiency improvements are sort of not quite a given, but have been very steady in the history of solar technology. But they're different improvements than people expect from our cell phones or our laptops. And it seems like they keep getting smaller and faster and more efficient. The difference with from cell phones or other kind of consumer electronics to solar panels is that the improvements in efficiency in solar are really gradual. We've seen 0.25%, 0.5%, 1% efficiency improvements annually, pretty steadily as manufacturers tweak the construction of the different components to eke out a little bit more electricity. So the sentiment I hear from people occasionally is, well, maybe I'll wait a few years and then there'll be something twice as good. Or if you do a Google search for solar panel efficiency, you're going to see all of these articles about these university labs around the world who have just tried this new material, this new technique, and are doubling the efficiency of solar cells. And that's all exciting stuff. But the reality in the industry is really different from that. It takes either a long time for that technology to trickle into commercially available solar panels, or it's just found not to be cost effective or not reliable. The solar panels that are going in now are really an evolution of technology that was developed in the 60s by Bell Labs, refined for efficiency and reliability. And so making a big change to that means it needs to meet this really well-established bar of operating in rooftop conditions for decades. So it's a high bar to clear, and one that by and large hasn't materialized from what works well in a lab translating to what happens on the commercially available solar panels. But we do see improvements. Panels I've got on my roof that are powering this presentation right now, I put on 6 years ago. The ones that we're installing now are about 20% more efficient. So we have seen some fairly significant gains over those last few years. And the other big change has been in cost. So these are the lowest costs that we've seen for panels ever. And so that helps to drive the system costs down. So again, for comparison, this system that I had 6 years ago, put in, I've got 19 panels. The same size system now would need 14 panels to get me the same amount of electricity. So you can imagine it's that much less roof space. And also the cost would be about 60% of what it was 6 years ago. So that all equates to really significant changes for our bottom line and you know, the calculus of going solar. Another change that I think has been a barrier for some people is the aesthetics, and I understand that. I sure like the systems that we install to look really good. You know, yeah, I notice when they stand out, and I'm sure other people do too. So to help with that, manufacturers have shifted to largely using all black panels. So it means, as you can see in this picture from Taylor Dock here, the frames of the panels are black. The cells themselves are black, and then the space between the cells are also black. So from a distance, it just kind of blends in, especially with a dark colored roof. We still have other options. Black frames with white backsheet ends up offering a little bit more efficiency. So those are still out there as well. But the previous, well, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, the only option was silver frames that tended to stand out a little bit more on the roof. And, you know, some roofs, that's fine. Other roofs, the value in aesthetics, especially in new construction, is pretty paramount. So that's been an improvement. And then another area that we're seeing more and more of is consumption monitoring. So some equipment manufacturers have consumption monitoring built into their system. Enphase is one company that makes the inverters that makes it really easy to be able to see what you're using in your home alongside what you're generating from solar. That's a really powerful tool to be able to understand where your electricity is going and make decisions based on that. So maybe that old ancient freezer that you've got down in the basement that, well, it keeps working. You all of a sudden, when you can see your consumption monitoring, you see this huge spike as you're using 5 times as much electricity while it's running. You think, oh boy, maybe it is time to, you know, take up those rebate offers and retire that old dinosaur. So it lets you change how you use electricity. Well, it helps you learn about how you're using electricity in your home and make some decisions around that. That's also an option that can be added on to just about any system out there, if it's not kind of standard or included, can be added on. There's a monitor called Sense that has some unique kind of algorithms that it uses to be able to detect what particular devices or appliances are running based on their electrical usage signature. So they're the only ones I'm aware of that has that feature. So I'll drop a link in the chat for the Sense monitor. You can go check out that if you're interested. You know, a few $100s to be able to see how you're using electricity, especially in cases where you just can't figure it out. You know, I've had people pulling out their hair saying, I don't know where I'm using electricity. I turn off my lights, I keep my heat low. You know, what is it? And we found well pumps that are using a lot of electricity. That hot tub that isn't really being used, but is kept at 98 degrees, you know, is using a whole bunch of electricity. So yeah, powerful tool that a few years ago wasn't either wasn't as inexpensive or wasn't as kind of full featured. So then as we look forward to the future, and as we talk about going net zero, you know, a few considerations there. System sizing. How many panels do I need for my house? One of the most common questions I get, and short answer is it really depends on how much electricity you use. But jumping over to the Right On Rambler that you all wanted to hear more about. So that was an existing home that the homeowners had purchased and wanted to retrofit to be more energy efficient and reach net zero, which they did in flying colors. And so what we were able to do in the situation of an existing home is to take solar access readings from the roof. So schedule a site assessment to do those readings. So we can look at how much sun reaches different points on the roof, identify any areas that are more heavily shaded than others that we can avoid putting panels on. Also lets us take measurements of the roof so we know exactly how much roof space we have to work with. And then get a sense for how the electrical is laid out in there and if there's any recommendations for changes to that electrical system. And then from there, we worked with the team at Bundle. You know, Dan is a great partner to do energy modeling, be able to look at how much electricity that home is expected to use after the anticipated changes. I believe they also use the Community Energy Challenge, so shout out to them. If you've got an existing home, you're interested in understanding more about how your home is using electricity and want really data-driven third-party feedback on how that is, and a really clear report. I've done it for my house. I can't recommend them enough. That is money well spent to get some insight into what's going on into these places where we spend so much of our time, especially during this pandemic. So in that situation, they were able to do the Community Energy Challenge audit, learn about what was going on with their house, sort of where the weak points were, and work with Dan and his team to identify those and make sure that they were addressed. Similarly, we had some really clear goals for how much solar we wanted to generate, not just for the usage for space heating, water heating, appliances, but also electric vehicle charging. So that was a situation where we were able to size the system and gave them multiple options. One, to get the home to net zero without the electric car, and another one that was a bit larger to include the electric car. And that's a really common question that people are thinking about and that we are asking about as we're talking with folks about solar is do you have an electric car? Are you planning for one, or would you like to plan for one as we're sizing the system? And if you're looking for something to take notes on, here's my little soundbite about charging an electric car with solar. Really roughly, it's about one solar panel for 1,000 miles of driving your electric car per year. As they get more efficient, both the panels and the cars, that number is getting a little bit off. You need a little bit less than that, but roughly speaking, that's what we would add. So it's not just one size fits all for an electric car because people drive different distances. In that case, we added in another few panels to be able to provide them, I think, with about 8,000 miles of electric car charging per year. And that could be split between two cars that are just both used for city or one car. So that's an area where, want to be preparing for the future, certainly. And in rough terms, getting to net zero, of course, there's a lot of variation, but we need about 10 kilowatts. And with the modern panels, that's 28 panels or so, give or take, to get to net zero in an efficient all-electric home. I say efficient sort of with the understanding that we're all here on Green Homes. We've seen what efficient homes look like. It isn't just Energy Star appliances. It isn't just a bunch of installation in your crawl space. It's really looking at the whole building holistically. And so we've got all these other great resources for this weekend. So hopefully you are totally familiar and experts on what it takes to make a net zero home. But from the solar side, we're aiming for about 10 kilowatts or about 28 solar panels to get net zero in all electric efficient home. We need more than that for sites that have shading or east-west roofs that don't get quite as much sun as a due-south roof. Might need more panels if it's a particularly large home, if there's multiple families, there's lots of variables there, but that gives you a rough idea of what we're aiming for. And of course, more if we want to plan for that electric car. So then the next question here, preparing for the future with oversizing. Do you put in a little bit more now to prepare for that electric car that is still maybe 3 to 5 years out in your future? Or do you do what you need right now to cover what you're using and come back later and put in those additional 6, 7 panels, whatever you're after? There's a couple of factors there that make it so I can't just give you a straight answer. But timing of that expansion is really important because that tax credit that we talked about is set to go down. So the panels, those extra 6 panels that you put in now are going to be eligible for that 26% tax credit. If you come back in 5 years, maybe there'll be a tax credit, maybe there won't. What we know now is that from what we can see right now, there won't be a tax credit. So then those panels will cost 26% more without that tax credit in a few years compared to putting that extra in now. So costs will increase without that tax credit. The other side of it is, do you want to just do it once and call it good? There's some added costs for an installer to come back twice. So doing an initial install and then having another truck roll to set back up, set up safety equipment, add in those additional panels later that make it a bit more expensive add in those additional panels, just from a install standpoint. And then the other consideration though is what's reasonable. You know, what can be reasonably expected to be used in the near future. I generally don't want to be sizing systems trying to look into our crystal ball of what electricity usage might look like in 10 years, and instead want to look at the near future and what seems reasonable to prepare for, given where you know, you are in your process of kind of home energy efficiency, electric car, and overall electricity usage. So yeah, all good considerations there. Another note too on preparing your site for solar, and this was really helpful at the Right On Rambler, working with not just the designer to be thinking about where those panels are going to go, but also the builder on where those panels are going. It's really common for folks who aren't thinking about those solar panels, builders in particular, to just have the plumbers put those pipes, you know, vent pipes, chimney stacks, whatever, just straight up through the roof. So having a builder who understands where those panels are going, can communicate with other tradespeople who are working on that project to say, hey, can we reroute over to the north side where we're not putting panels? Means that we have more roof space available for solar. It looks better. And yeah, it makes our job easier as well. So we sure like to get looped in with the project team as quickly and as early in the process as possible. So sometimes people are just sending us plans and we're talking with them while things are sort of in the dream stage. Happy to engage at that point so we can be a part of those early conversations and getting everybody on the same page for how solar fits into the plan. So batteries is another area that certainly has shifted from 6 years ago. In the last 2 years, we have done more batteries than we did in the first 15 years as a solar installer. And there's a few reasons for that. One is cost. They have come down in cost and complexity. Options for those batteries has opened up considerably. So a big name out there that a lot of people have heard about is Tesla. They make a product called the Powerwall. So that's their home battery product. So we have found that those are a great option for people who just want their battery backup to work. So when we talk about what are batteries used for, there's a couple of different uses. First one is providing backup during an outage. Solar is great during the day. It's powering your home, offsetting electricity you'd otherwise be taking from the grid. Downside of a basic system is that it doesn't provide backup power during an outage. So if we all lost power right now, I would be signed off because my solar panels would not be keeping my home powered, even though it's a bright, beautiful, sunny day. Few reasons for that: safety for electricians trying to bring power back to your house, code regulations for the equipment. Just makes it tough for solar to work without grid power, without some electronic wizardry, or batteries. So in the case of having batteries, they're kept charged. So that way, during an outage, they can provide a sort of a grid signal to the solar equipment and trick it to staying on while also keeping it isolated from the grid. So that way there's no concern about electrocuting those nice utility workers trying to get your power back on. We don't like that, and they don't either. So that's a primary purpose of batteries. Keep the basics running during an outage. Some battery backups are designed and sized to cover just the necessities, your fridge, some lights, and some are designed and sized to cover everything. Maybe you just want to be able to kick your feet up and live like you normally would. You know, that's possible now in a way that previously it was much harder to do or took a lot more equipment.
Hey, so, I just also want to mention we have roughly about a little bit more than 10 minutes just to
okay.
keep you on the right.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, the other purpose for those and something to have in mind for the future, it's not a reality yet, but is what we call peak shaving using those batteries. So here in our area, they don't care, or Puget Sound Energy doesn't care when you use electricity or when you send it back to the grid. It's all the same. They just care how much that you're sending over the course of a year. With batteries though, and in some parts of the country, they have peak and off-peak rates. So they pay a lot more when they're using electricity in the evening time compared to middle of the day or middle of the night. So those batteries can be charged by solar during the day, drawn from in the evening time when electricity might cost 2 or 3 times what it does other times. And then they sit empty until the sun comes up in the morning and they get recharged. So in those cases, it provides a financial benefit to have batteries and something to keep in mind for the future. Battery backup like Tesla Powerwall is able to do that peak shaving, charging daily and then discharging during those peak hours. So yeah, you're sort of future-proofing in anticipation of that eventually being the way billing is done here. And then in general, solar helps avoid electricity rate increases. For perspective, Puget Sound Energy asked for a 7% electricity rate increase last year. Because of the pandemic, the state didn't allow them that full 7%. Instead, they allowed them a 2% rate increase. But I think it signals to the pressure that Puget Sound Energy is under to raise rates in order to help invest in alternative sources as they divest or sell off their coal-fired power plants in Montana over these next few years. So as they make those investments elsewhere, they're almost certainly going to need to pass that on to ratepayers as rate increases. So you're hedging against those by having solar. So next up, I want to just talk through financing. So cost of the systems vary really wildly. 10,000 on the low end, 25, 30,000 for larger residential systems. Batteries also cost a fairly significant amount still, 12,000 and up for batteries. But a lot of people that we work with use this solar loan to be able to finance all or a portion of their system cost. So we recommend Puget Sound Cooperative Credit Union because of how specialized their product is. It's secured by the solar equipment, not home equity, so there's no appraisal needed. It goes really smoothly. Got some examples of rates here where they start, no down payment required, no prepayment penalty, and really significantly when thinking about solar as part of a broader remodel or energy efficiency kind of project, a portion of this loan can be used for non-solar home improvements. So that might be the heat pump you're dreaming of, that might be more insulation, new roof, all those things can be included in this loan and really helpful for that. So that ends my slides. Curious to hear about questions. Does anybody, how did we do, Thomas, on the questions that people had or things that they wanted to learn or anything in the chat that I missed?
In the chat, I think we're good. I think maybe one of the questions is talking about, do you need to install the whole array versus can you have a partial array right now? I think you talked about it briefly, but maybe some more on that, and then maybe close off with the Bayside house. Yeah, great.
Yes, you can totally put in a smaller array now and add to it later. Yeah, it doesn't need to be the whole thing now. Happy to talk with you on a particular situation where you're looking at your usage and have some anticipated changes over time, and how forecasting out might be a better option than doing it all right now. So yeah, either way works. And again, there are some financial implications on whether you do it now or whether you wait on that, specifically the tax credit and overall cost to do that.
Would you say that it's easier to gauge the amount of electricity that's going to be needed on like a new home build versus like an addition or something like that?
Great question. Existing home is easier to gauge because we've got some data about lifestyle usage, how those particular people live in that home and specific to them. So when a new construction, we sure like to loop in folks like Dan or the home designer, see if they've done an energy analysis or kind of usage estimation to give us some idea of what we're aiming for. Little spoiler, Felicity House, the other one, also worked with Dan on. He gave us a goal that they were trying to hit, and that helped us decide which panels to go with. We ended up going with some higher efficiency panels because we were limited on roof space there. And so we wanted to be able to make the absolute most from that roof space. So there's some considerations that are really helpful when we've got a specific goal in mind. And usually that goal is coming from an existing bill or from conversations with a home designer about what anticipated usage is in the case of a new build.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
If there's any other questions, I would definitely advocate for you guys asking those. And if not, Ty, if you did want to talk about the I call it Bayside. I forget what we're calling it.
Yeah, well, you know what? I think I covered everything I wanted to. I don't have a slide for it. I didn't get pictures for it. I figured people had already looked at the tour of it. But yeah, that's a really great example of us getting involved with the whole project team, being able to. You might have noticed it's just one large single array on the front of the house, but there's no vents coming up that require us to work around. So from an aesthetic standpoint, from a production standpoint, we were able to use the best space on the roof, yeah, and have it look as good as possible. Yeah, that I think I sort of said what I was hoping to about the process of getting them net zero, and I think that they are significantly better than net zero, where they have you know, this really large abundance of electricity. So that gives them flexibility in the future to decide you know, how many electric cars and how they use that electricity. So
yeah, I think they had the 4th lowest HERS score in the nation, according to Dan. So I also just dropped the link to that specific home with the tour
Great.
and all of the fun stuff in the chat. So if you guys are wanting to see this, the Right on Rambler home we're talking about, it's in the chat right now.
Great. And one last note there. They actually, I think both of these sites that are featured have metal roof, standing seam metal roof. A common question we get is, what's the best roof type for solar? The short answer is we can work with just about anything, but the best, in my opinion, is a standing seam roof, because we can use clamps that attach to those seams and don't require penetrations in that brand new metal roof. But still provide a good, strong attachment for those solar, the solar mounting equipment. And you know, there's the other green builders will be able to speak to the other benefits of metal roofing compared to asphalt shingles in particular. But yeah, that's my one plug on the roof system there.